Fortunately, I have decidedly more time than the instantaneous grammar or other forms of communication like the twittering of the birds in the trees in your day would otherwise permit. This allows me to continue telling the story of the Declaration of Independence, a story so aptly begun in this series of conversations by my compatriot, Richard Henry Lee. Mr. Lee told you of how, on Friday, June 7th, 1776, he proposed the 3 resolutions that brought us one step closer to a declaration of our independence. The first of the resolutions proposed independence. The second proposed the forming of foreign alliances. The third proposed that we create a plan of confederation between the colonies. On Saturday, June 8th, Congress proceeded to take the first resolution, that of independency, into consideration, and referred it to a committee of the whole, into which they immediately resolved themselves, and passed that day and Monday the 10th in debating on the subject. I took notes on these debates, which I saved as a record for posterity. The debate was not on whether we should become independent, but on when and how. It was argued by James Wilson, Robert R. Livingston, Edward Rutledge, John Dickinson, and others, that though they were friends to the measures themselves, and saw the impossibility that we should ever again be united with Great Britain, yet they were against adopting them at this time. They said that we should wait for the voice of the people to drive us to it, which would happen soon enough. They essentially argued that we should first effect the second 2 resolutions by establishing alliances and organizing ourselves internally. Only then would we be ready to officially declare our independence. On the other side, it was argued by John Adams, Mr. Lee, George Wythe, and others, that this was the best opportunity we would have, and that if we waited, we would miss our chance. The king had already made us independent by declaring us out of his protection, and no delegates could be denied a power of declaring an existing truth. They said that the people were waiting for us to lead the way. We had to take the risk of making the commitment publicly if we were to expect anyone, be they foreign powers or our own people, to join in the cause. It appearing in the course of these debates that the colonies of New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, South Carolina, and Maryland were not yet matured for falling from the parent stem, but that they were fast advancing to that state, it was thought most prudent to wait a while for them, and to postpone the final decision for 3 weeks. But that this might occasion as little delay as possible, a committee was appointed to prepare a Declaration of Independence. The committee were John Adams, Dr. Franklin, Roger Sherman, Robert R. Livingston, and myself. You may be wondering, if Robert R. Livingston of New York had been one of the leading spokesmen for not declaring independence so soon, why was he placed on the committee to draft the Declaration? The people of New York had not voted to support independence by June 11th, but we believed they soon would. Having Mr. Livingston on that committee would encourage them. Roger Sherman of Connecticut was universally respected in Congress as a man of moderation. He, like Livingston, did not participate actively in the drafting process. However, their presence on the committee helped to reassure the more tenuous delegates that this declaration would not be too radical to effect unity. Dr. Franklin was the most well-known and respected of the delegates in the eyes of European nations, whom we needed to enlist to our aid. He brought to the committee an international reputation as well as extended practical understanding of what the delicacy of foreign courts would require in a formal declaration. He was not eager to write the draft. "I have made it a rule," said he to me, "whenever in my power, to avoid becoming the draftsman of papers to be reviewed by a public body." John Adams had been one of the leaders of independency and the independency movement from the very beginning. Moreover, he represented Massachusetts, which had long suffered the worst infringements of rights by Parliament and the King. He was, however, busy with other committees. Among the reasons he gave that I should write the draft was the fact that I was a Virginian. This made sense. The majority of the conflicts having taken place in New England up until that point, part of our task was to convince the Southern states that this was their struggle too. Of the Southern states, Virginia was the most populous, and had early become a leader in the movement to assert our equal rights. He also acknowledged that, while his vehemence and forthrightness of expression had caused some in Congress to look at him with a jaundiced eye, my own habitual silence during debates, when I made it a practice to take careful notes, meant that the draft coming from my pen would earn it no enemies a priori. Delegates would be more likely to consider the words on their own account. It may seem strange to you that all of the committee members were not vying for the honor of writing such an important document. In June of 1776, none of us realized how important the Declaration of Independence would eventually become. Oh, we knew that what we were doing overall was important, but we thought that the June 7th resolution for independency would be the most memorable document. Between the 11th and the 28th, I primarily worked alone. I did most of the work in one of the 2 rooms that I had rented on the southwest corner of High Street, which you may know better as Market Street, and 7th, from one Mr. Jacob Graff. This location was, at the time, situated toward the outskirts of Philadelphia. At that location I enjoyed the benefits of freely circulating air and more peace and quiet than a more centrally situated living quarters would allow. I wrote a number of drafts, of which I preserved a portion. Dr. Franklin and Mr. Adams made a few alterations during this process. For instance, my original draft read, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." At the suggestion of the committee, that was changed to the much more scientific expression, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." I knew it was my duty not to find out new principles or new arguments never before thought of, nor merely to say things which had never been said before, but to place before mankind the common sense of the subject in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent, and to justify ourselves in the independent stand we were compelled to take. Neither aiming at originality of principle or sentiment, nor yet copied from any particular and previous writing, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and to give to that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. It therefore should come as no surprise that I found expressions that harmonized with sentiments expressed elsewhere in the colonies. For instance, the Virginia Bill of Rights, which was adopted by the convention at Williamsburg on the day after our committee had been formed in Philadelphia to write the Declaration, read in part, "That all men are by nature equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety." After changes by the committee as well as by Congress, the Declaration as approved by the Continental Congress read, "That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This brings me to the changes made by Congress. After the committee approved the draft, I reported it to the House on Friday, the 28th of June, when it was read and ordered to lie on the table. Richard Henry Lee kept a tally of the July 2nd vote on the same page where he had written the Independency Resolution. John Adams will tell you the story of the debates and the vote, so I will move my story forward to the afternoon of the 2nd. After the vote on independence, Congress proceeded the same day to consider the Declaration, the announcement of independence. This is when they began to make their changes. The pusillanimous idea that we had friends in England worth keeping terms with still haunted the minds of many. For this reason, those passages which conveyed censures on the people of England were struck out, lest they should give them offense. Congress made many more changes than that, 86 in all, including the shortening of the document by a quarter. On the afternoon of the 4th, it was read aloud for final review and approved. Congress then ordered the Declaration of Independence printed. That part of the story, however, will be told by John Dunlap, the man who printed the document.